What's the craziest reason you had to fire someone? Years ago, at a lumber company, had a guy, less than 2 hours after he started on his first day, pick up his car with a forklift and stand underneath it to see what was rattling when he drove. Turned out it was his brain. His head wasn't screwed on tight. When I worked in hotels, I was promoted to front desk manager. My first task was to hire someone. I ended up getting this very charismatic guy that was a little over the top, but overall seemed like a solid employee. After I end up hiring him, and on his first day he asked me if it's okay if he carries his gun on him, and I think that's strange, but it is his right and the owners honestly didn't care, so long as he had his license. He was never able to produce a license, so he was never able to bring this handgun on the property. About a week into his employment we find out that he's been calling guests, specifically the really attractive females, and asking them if they need any overpass service. We were very understaffed and my boss decided that instead of firing him, we were going to take him off the desk and put him on basic groundsman duties. Part of these duties included driving the shuttle to the airport and back, and also filling up the shuttle when it got low on fuel, which means that he had access to the gas card. Our accountant confronts me one day about some very strange charges to the gas card. Apparently we had been filling up the shuttle near daily at anywhere between $20 to $45. We looked into it and got the surveillance footage from the gas station, and it turns out was this kid filling up his friends' cars and even his own car. When confronted he tells my boss that I said it was okay. Obviously that wasn't true, and they didn't believe him. He ended up also being my first termination. One of the other employees googled his name and found out he was a child predator. He was in a sexual relationship with a 12-year-old girl when he was 26. I also found out that day that we did not actually do background checks, we just said we did and assumed anyone with a history wouldn't bother applying. The first part was bad, but then WTF. There were a few other things about him that made me raise eyebrows during his short employment. When we discovered that, I was hardly shocked. Dude was a walking embarrassment to the human race. Once I had a guy call in sick to his restaurant/bar shift right before his shift, and then proceeded to show up shit-faced drunk for happy hour during the time he was supposed to be working. He was not a bright man. Did he forget he called in sick? Probably. I once had my friend call in sick to not come into work for me. Problem was, he didn't work for me to begin with. I'm not an employer. He just called and said I just wanted to let you know. I had a stomach flu. I'm sorry, I can't come in today. I'm sorry. And I said, well, that's fine with me, but maybe you should call your work and tell them that. Also try not to sound so drunk. And he replied, I'm sorry, but I can't. And then he hung up. I had a guy call in stating he couldn't come in because he got bit by a werewolf. I'm still not sure if he was serious. He never came back. Not too crazy, more stupid than crazy. One of the programmers on my team was sitting at his desk looking at porn. And this is cubicle land, no offices. My director walked into the area to talk to me and saw it. Then it was the first thing he told me about. So I got up and walked over for a look myself, and there it was. Me and the director looked at each, and I said, I gotta take care of this. So we walked back 2 hours. I told them what was going on and what we saw, and they told me to fire him. So I did. He lost a $110,000 job for looking at porn on his computer at work. If I look at porn, I want to whack one off. Work really isn't the place for it. Do people really watch porn just to watch it? A guy shaved/trimmed off his pubes and left them scattered across a shared desk in a shared office. When confronted, he pulled a George Costanza. Oh, is that frowned upon? Yes. Dumbus stole a $100 bill out of the register at the end of his first shift alone on register. He didn't know about cash balancing. If someone is dumb enough to steal that much out of a register, I don't think knowledge is enough to stop them. The guy had somehow hung on by the skin of his teeth when caught making plastic model funny cars at his desk. Pro tip: Throwing a newspaper over the model doesn't hide the smell of the glue. But when a client called complaining about our hero trying to sell him golf clubs out of the trunk of his car, he was gone. Like black market golf clubs, it was like he would show them salesmen samples of clubs they could order through him. He was an older draftsman / field rep with an architecture degree who never passed the licensing exam. He would try to sell the clubs when he was on job site inspections during construction. So like buy some golf clubs and you'll pass inspection kind of thing. Probably more like, oh by the way, do you play golf? I can get you a great deal on clubs, let me show you. Apostrophe. I worked retail, and we had an employee that would hide and take naps inside racks of clothes. Somehow that wasn't the reason we fired her. We fired her for stealing clothes and then wearing them to work. Like you can somewhat understand having a nap. Maybe she thought hide in plain sight with the clothes. Lady probably mastered the art of sleeping standing up and was going to pretend to be a mannequin. Not me but my dad. He has a small handyman company with less than a handful of employees. His tools somehow have the habit of growing legs when he's at construction sites, so he rigorously writes his name on everything with permanent marker. One day, shortly after he hired someone new, his folding ruler is missing. He asks around if anyone has seen his folding ruler, but that doesn't seem to be the case. He doesn't think much of it. Sometimes things get lost. The next day he sees the new hire with a familiar looking folding ruler. He asks him to see it. New hire refuses. Dad tells him that he's his boss and insists he shows him the ruler. He complies under pressure. Sure enough, there's my dad's name on it in capital and bold letters. Now that could've been an honest mistake and there probably wouldn't have been any repercussions if he simply said, oh, my bad. Must have put the wrong one in my pocket. Here's your ruler. But the new hire insisted that this was his ruler and that the name on the side of it wasn't my dad's handwriting, but rather a note the new hire had written on it himself to remember my dad's name. What makes it even more stupid is that my dad's company pays for the tools of his employees. He could've simply asked for a folding ruler and my dad would given him one for free, but no. He needs to steal the boss's folding ruler and give the stupidest lie imaginable as an excuse. Ooh boy. I'd have to go with a guy who in the span of 24 hours started a fist fight with another employee on camera with witnesses, then called the police and said the other guy did it, trying to press charges. I just sent the video. Trespassed on the property the following day and slared at my boss on camera with witnesses, then called the police and said my boss did it. I just sent the video. Hurt himself somehow and went to the hospital where he told the doctor he'd been attacked at work. Doc found no injury consistent with his story and well yeah, camera. The guy just couldn't figure out what video evidence was. Why did he start the fight? I deal with complaints for a bank. Customers always tell a story where they are totally reasonable and staff threaten to attack them. They know calls are recorded. They know the bank has CCTV footage. Yet they think if they kick up enough of a stink they will be right. Had one guy who spoke broken English who was adamant that a previous advisor put the payment to the wrong account number, and he was right. I listened to the call, assumed the advisor may have misheard because I was only following like 75% of what was said and having to work the rest out from context. I tell him I will listen to the call while he is in hold, which he agrees to. The one part of that call where he was actually clear is him giving the wrong number. The advisor clearly repeats this number twice. The customer agrees. I go back and explain this to him, but he says I'm wrong. Or I must be lying. I try to explain I have absolutely no reason to lie. Indeed, if I did lie I would be putting my job in danger. He refuses to believe me. I get someone else to listen and call him back. She confirms he gave the wrong number. He again says no, and we end up sending him a copy of the call. I looked into notes on the account weeks later, after he requested the call recording. He said we must have tampered with the recording. We still quote I know what I said. I'm not a baby. When we realized we made a mistake at work. Had to fire a guy for coming to work high on meth and getting lost in a closet while painting it. Asked what the deal was and was told I'm having a conversation. That was his last Dale Mayo. He got lost in Narnia. Fired a high schooler because his girlfriend kept showing up and they would disappear behind the racks. I told him his girlfriend was banned trying to not fire him and she kept sneaking back. Worked in an office and they hired a girl from a temp agency to help me. She wouldn't do anything unless I walked her through each step after telling her she had to do it. Hey, an estimate just arrived on the fax right next to you. Complete the quote and send it back. Come to find out she was playing Spider and Solitaire on her computer. She was also sneaking out back and the warehouse guys thought she was doing drugs. I told my boss get rid of her. I would rather work alone than babysit her, so he called the temp agency and told them to stop sending her. She showed up the next day, so boss sent her home and called the agency saying hey she is useless, stop sending her. She showed up again the next day. This went on for over a week. The people at the temp agency said they told her to stop showing, but she kept coming in every morning. Mind you, usually 10 to 20 minutes late. My boss wouldn't say anything to her face, so finally I said hey, we can't afford to pay you, so we had to let you go through the temp agency. They should have told you. She was, although I thought they were joking. I was so glad she was gone. Imagine being so useless that working alone is literally easier. We had someone fall asleep at his desk with a lit cigarette in his hand in an office full of cubicles like maybe 6 to 7 years ago. Smoking wasn't legal anywhere indoors, let alone in an office building in Mayo, and the first time he wasn't even fired. He was fired when it happened again. Had a guy on my team start smoking a cigarette at his desk. He was diabetic, and when confronted it was clear he was low on blood sugar. A soda later, and he was quickly himself. It is amazing how crazy people can get with low blood sugar. I'm a part-time EMT, and we had a call to a church one day and this little old lady was just cussing up a storm and fighting with us. We seriously had to get the priest to help us calm her down and get her to drink some juice and come with us. By the time her glucose levels came back up, she was the nicest lady. Definitely one of my more memorable calls, lol. I was a bartender slash bar manager. This guy came in one night and said he was an aspiring DJ and asked if we would consider hiring him to come in just on Sunday nights to DJ for us. He said we wouldn't have to pay him at first. He would just take tips and we could renegotiate after he helped to build up our Sunday night crowd. He lasted less than 3 months. He drove away so much business and I got so many complaints. He played the same songs every week, and when people made requests for commonly known songs, he had no idea who the musicians, were. I had to fire someone who was working for free. He was a nice guy, which is the only reason he lasted as long as he did. This is both sad and hilarious at the same time. He worked at the company for 2 weeks. Came to the Christmas party on Friday. Got shit-faced. Told the hour manager that she was a slut and would die alone. They had some previous vaguely romantic history. Went on a couple of dates or something. Tried to fight 2 of the customer service managers who asked him to calm down. And while being escorted out he turned to the CEO and COO and told them to go fuck themselves. He showed up to work on the Monday talking about how fun the party was and how he had seen some people who would probably be called into hours that morning. He was the first and only employee to be called and was sacked on the spot. Some Todd Packer energy there. I'm a chef at an upscale restaurant. The sauté cook has a lobster dish on his station that involves a technique called deglazing that involves alcohol, so in turn the pan catches on fire briefly and flames up. When you do it correctly, hard to do it incorrect, the alcohol is cooked off and the flame goes out. Every time he made this dish he would deglaze the pan, catch it on fire, and then blow it out, blowing his own germs and nastiness all over someone's food and everything in the blast radius. That was a week ago. Fired him after he did it multiple times, after being asked not to. Maybe it's because of the current state of affairs, but I couldn't believe a trained cook would do that. I'm a mere prep cook /decent line experience, and I can't believe someone would do that. Pandemic or not, it's just not what you do. It's like cutting cheese into tiny pieces instead of using a grater. I mean, cutting the cheese would be stupid and inefficient. The blowing thing is just morally wrong really. If someone would do that in front of a team of chefs, it truly scares me to think about what the dude did when no one was around. I worked at a retail store and found one of my coworkers was using the company iPad that we used to play music and order lunches to go on Craigslist and search for hookups. She didn't even bother to delete the search history. What did she search for? It was back when casual encounters was a thing on Craigslist. She was 18 and seemed to be drawn to men at least 20 years her senior. Eek. Fired a guy for looking to pay someone to cast black magic on the owner and the owner's family to bewitch them into giving him a raisin. Ironically, never firing him. Only reason I found out was because he asked someone else in the office for help in finding a witch doctor to cast the spells and word got round. No one wanted to be in the same room as him after that. When I confronted him, he said the devil made him do it, so it wasn't his fault. I live in the Middle East. I definitely did not wake up expecting to fire someone for black magic that day. Side note, practicing black magic is literally a death sentence here. He's gonna post about firing his witch doctor. Which is stupid, because he should just uaah ting tang while all alabing banged.